I looked up from my desk and saw a woman walking into my courtroom who appeared to be holding herself together by sheer force of will. Her hands were clutched around her purse so tightly, her knuckles were white. Her name was Rachel, 36 years old, marketing director, mother of 2 young children, and 12 hours earlier, her husband had emptied their joint bank accounts and disappeared. $73,000 gone in a single night. While Rachel slept upstairs with their kids, her husband of 9 years had transferred every penny out of their joint account and vanished. She'd woken up to get coffee money and discovered her debit card was declined. That's how she found out her marriage was over and her family was broke. This was an emergency hearing. Rachel's attorney had filed for it immediately after Rachel discovered what happened. We don't usually move this fast, but when someone empties a joint account and flees, every hour matters. The longer we waited, the harder that money would be to trace and recover. Rachel's attorney stood and explained what had happened. Rachel and her husband, Tom, had been married for 9 years, 2 kids, ages 5 and 7. They'd seemed happy, normal marriage problems, but nothing catastrophic. They both worked. They shared finances. They had a joint checking account where both their paychecks were deposited, and all their bills were paid from. Last night, Tom had come home from work acting strange, distant. He'd barely spoken to Rachel during dinner, put the kids to bed without his usual story time, told Rachel he was going to bed early because he had a headache. She'd thought he was just stressed about work. Rachel went to bed around 11. Tom was already asleep, or pretending to be. Rachel said she remembered thinking it was odd that he was facing away from her. He usually slept on his back, but she was tired. She didn't think much of it. At 3 in the morning, Tom got up. Rachel heard him, but assumed he was using the bathroom. She drifted back to sleep. She didn't hear him leave the house, didn't hear his car start, didn't know anything was wrong until morning. Rachel woke up at 7 to get the kids ready for school. Tom wasn't in bed. His car was gone. She figured he'd left early for work. Again, unusual, but not alarming. She got the kids breakfast, started getting them dressed, realized she needed to stop for gas on the way to school. She went to grab cash from her wallet. Empty. She'd used the last of her cash yesterday. No problem. She'd use her debit card. She got to the gas station, swiped her card, and it was declined. She tried again. Declined. She checked her banking app on her phone. Account balance, $0.17. Rachel said she stared at that number for a full minute, not understanding what she was seeing. They'd had $73,000 in that account yesterday. Their savings, tax refund they hadn't spent yet, money they were keeping liquid while they decided whether to use it for a down payment on a bigger house. She called the bank. They told her there had been a transfer at 3:14 that morning. $73,000 moved to an external account, authorized by valid login credentials. The bank couldn't reverse it. The money was gone. Rachel called Tom, straight to voicemail. She called his work. They said Tom had sent an email at 4 in the morning saying he was quitting, effective immediately. They were surprised, but they'd accepted his resignation. They had no idea where he was. Rachel called Tom's parents. They hadn't heard from him. She called his brother. Same thing. She called every friend she could think of. No one had seen Tom or knew where he was. It was like he'd evaporated. That's when Rachel understood. Tom had planned this. The transfer at 3 in the morning wasn't random. It was deliberate. He'd waited until she was asleep, moved all their money, then left. He'd abandoned his family and stolen their savings in one calculated move. Rachel's attorney entered evidence of the bank transfer. The timestamp, the amount, the destination account was in Tom's name only at a different bank, an account Rachel didn't know existed. Tom had opened it 3 weeks earlier. He'd been planning this for at least that long. The attorney also entered Tom's resignation email. It was brief, professional, no mention of family or personal issues. Just a standard 2-week notice waived with immediate resignation. Tom had severed his employment the same night he'd severed his family. I asked if there had been any warning signs, any indication Tom was planning to leave. Rachel said no. That's what made this so devastating. They'd been fine. They'd had a date night 2 weeks ago. They'd talked about summer vacation plans. Tom had helped their daughter with her science project over the weekend. Rachel said she'd been replaying the last few weeks in her mind all morning, trying to find clues she'd missed. And there had been small things. Tom had been quieter than usual. He'd been on his phone more. He'd mentioned being stressed about work. But nothing that suggested he was planning to drain their bank account and disappear. The attorney entered phone records. Tom had made 7 calls to a number Rachel didn't recognize in the 3 days before he left. Each call lasted between 15 and 40 minutes. Rachel had tried calling the number. It was disconnected. Tom had also searched for information about opening bank accounts, transferring large sums of money, and states without extradition agreements. He'd cleared his search history, but the attorney had recovered it from their home computer. Tom had been researching how to disappear with money. I asked Rachel if Tom had taken anything else. She said yes. His clothes, his laptop, his important documents like his passport and birth certificate. He'd packed a bag at some point, probably while she was sleeping, and taken everything he'd need to start over somewhere else. But he'd left the kids' stuff, their toys, their school supplies, their photos. He'd taken his own life and left theirs behind. He'd walked away from being a father the same night he'd walked away from being a husband. Rachel started crying when she talked about telling the kids. She said her 7-year-old had asked where Daddy was that morning. Rachel had told her Daddy had to go on a work trip. She didn't know how to tell her children that their father had abandoned them, that he'd chosen to disappear rather than be their dad anymore. The 5-year-old kept asking when Daddy would be back to play. Rachel said every time he asked, it felt like a knife in her chest. Because the truth was, she had no idea if Tom would ever come back. She had no idea if her kids would ever see their father again. Rachel's attorney asked for an immediate order freezing the account Tom had transferred the money to. He asked for an order requiring Tom to return the full $73,000. He asked for an emergency custody order giving Rachel full custody. And he asked for an order requiring Tom to pay child support and spousal support. But there was a problem. Tom was gone. We didn't know where he was. We couldn't serve him with orders if we couldn't find him. The attorney said he'd hired a private investigator, that so far there was no trace of Tom. He'd used cash to pay for gas when he left town. His phone was off. His credit cards hadn't been used. I granted everything Rachel's attorney requested. I froze the account Tom had transferred money to. I ordered the return of all funds. I gave Rachel emergency full custody. I ordered Tom to pay support. But I knew these were largely symbolic. You can't enforce orders against someone you can't locate. The bank had been served with the freeze order and confirmed the account still had $68,000 in it. Tom had withdrawn $5,000 in cash the day after the transfer, probably to have liquid funds while he stayed hidden. But most of the money was still in the account, and now it was frozen. He couldn't access it, but Rachel couldn't access it either until we had a full hearing and final orders. Rachel's attorney argued that the money should be returned to Rachel immediately, that it was marital funds Tom had no right to take unilaterally, that Rachel needed it to support herself and the kids, that every day the money sat frozen was another day Rachel couldn't pay her mortgage or buy groceries. I agreed in principle, but I also had to follow procedure. I couldn't just transfer money from one spouse to another without proper notice and hearing. Even though Tom had stolen the money first, Even though he'd abandoned his family, the law required certain steps. I ordered an expedited hearing for 1 week later. I ordered that Tom be served by publication, since he couldn't be located otherwise. I ordered the bank to maintain the freeze, and I told Rachel's attorney to file for contempt if Tom didn't appear. Rachel looked devastated. I could see she'd hoped I'd just give her the money back immediately. But I couldn't. Not yet. I told her I understood how difficult this was, that I'd move as fast as the law allowed, but that I had to follow proper procedure to make sure any orders I issued would hold up if Tom eventually challenged them. What I didn't tell Rachel, because I didn't want to scare her more, was that there were ways Tom could still get to that money even with the freeze. If he had access to a good attorney and filed the right motions in the right jurisdiction, he might be able to unfreeze the account before our hearing. If he'd planned this as carefully as it appeared, he might already have that in motion. The week between the emergency hearing and the full hearing was hell for Rachel. She told me later she'd had to borrow money from her parents to pay the mortgage. She'd put groceries on a credit card. She was terrified every day that her kids would realize something was seriously wrong. Her 7-year-old had started asking more questions. Where was Daddy really? Why wasn't he calling? When was he coming home? Rachel said she'd finally had to tell her daughter a version of the truth, that Daddy had to go away for a while and she didn't know when he'd be back. Her daughter had cried herself to sleep. The 5-year-old was too young to fully understand, but he was acting out. Tantrums, refusing to go to bed. Rachel said he could sense that something was wrong, even if he didn't understand what. The stability of their family had been shattered, and both kids were feeling it. Rachel's attorney had the investigator working overtime, trying to locate Tom. They'd found a few breadcrumbs. Tom had been spotted at a gas station 2 states away the day after he left. Security footage confirmed it was him. But after that, the trail went cold again. The investigator thought Tom might have crossed into Mexico. There were reports of his car at a border crossing, but they couldn't confirm he'd actually crossed or what he'd done after. Mexico made things complicated. Jurisdiction issues, extradition issues. If Tom was there, getting him back would be nearly impossible. The full hearing arrived, and Tom still hadn't been found. We proceeded without him. Rachel's attorney laid out the full case: the marriage, the joint account, Tom's unilateral withdrawal, his abandonment of the family, his refusal to respond to any attempts at contact. The attorney argued that Tom had committed theft, that taking money from a joint account without the other spouse's knowledge or consent is theft, even if you're married, that Rachel was entitled to immediate return of at least half the money and probably more, given that Tom had abandoned his children and his support obligations. I reviewed all the evidence again: the bank records, Tom's resignation, the search history showing premeditation, the investigator's report on Tom's disappearance. Everything pointed to the same conclusion: Tom had systematically planned to steal marital funds and abandon his family. I ruled that Tom had wrongfully taken the money, that his withdrawal of the entire joint account without Rachel's knowledge was conversion of marital property. I ordered that the frozen account be released to Rachel immediately, all $68,000. I ruled that the $5,000 Tom had taken in cash was also owed to Rachel, and if Tom was ever located, he'd have to pay it back with interest. I also ruled on custody and support. Rachel got full legal and physical custody. Tom was ordered to pay child support of $2,000 per month. He was ordered to pay spousal support of $1,000 per month. These orders would stand even in his absence. If he ever resurfaced and had wages to garnish, Rachel could collect. But the likelihood of that seemed slim. Tom had disappeared very thoroughly. The investigator said it seemed like Tom had researched not just how to take the money, but how to vanish afterward. He'd done it right. covered his tracks, moved fast, left minimal trace. Rachel got her money back, most of it. She could pay her mortgage, support her kids, keep some financial stability. But she didn't get her husband back, didn't get her kid's father back, didn't get answers about why Tom had done this. That was the question that haunted her. Why? They'd had problems like any marriage, but nothing that explained this. No affairs that she knew of, no secret addiction, no financial crisis. Tom had just decided one day that he didn't want this life anymore, and he'd taken their money and left. Rachel told me months later that the not knowing was the worst part. If Tom had been having an affair, she could understand. If he'd been using drugs, it would make sense. If he'd been fired and desperate, she'd get it. But there was no explanation. Just a normal Tuesday night, and then Tom was gone forever. The investigator eventually found evidence that Tom had been planning this for at least 6 months. He'd opened the second bank account. He'd slowly moved small amounts of money to test the transfer process. He'd researched disappearing. He'd mapped out his route. This wasn't impulsive. This was calculated, which made it so much worse. Tom had spent 6 months planning to leave while pretending everything was fine. He'd celebrated their anniversary, knowing he was going to abandon her. He'd tucked his kids into bed, knowing he was going to walk away from being their father. He'd lived the complete lie for half a year. Rachel filed for divorce. Tom was served by publication. He didn't respond. The divorce was granted by default. Rachel got everything: full custody, the house, the remaining savings. Tom got nothing because he didn't show up to claim anything. But none of that changed the fundamental reality. Rachel was now a single mother of 2 who had to explain to her children why their father had abandoned them. She had to work full-time and parent alone. She had to make every decision without a partner. Tom had stolen more than money. He'd stolen the family structure, the partnership, the future they'd been building. 3 years have passed since Tom disappeared. He's never been found. He's never contacted Rachel or the kids. He's never paid $1 of support. It's like he died, except there's no body and no closure. Rachel's kids are now 8 and 10. They ask about their dad less now. The 10-year-old has started saying she doesn't have a dad. The 8-year-old sometimes still asks when Daddy is coming home. Rachel doesn't know what to tell him. Rachel started dating again last year. She said it's hard because she doesn't trust anymore. How do you trust someone with your life when the person you trusted most destroyed it? How do you believe in partnership when your partner abandoned you? She's trying, but the scars are deep. I think about Tom sometimes, about what his life must be like now. Is he happy? Does he ever think about his kids? Does he regret what he did, or does he feel like he escaped something? I'll probably never know. That's what makes cases like this so frustrating. Tom committed multiple crimes: theft, abandonment, failure to pay support. He deserves to face consequences. But he's good at hiding, and apparently committed to staying hidden, so he just gets away with it. The kids are the real victims here. They didn't choose this. They didn't do anything wrong. Their father just decided they weren't worth staying for. That's a rejection that scars children permanently. Rachel can be the best mom in the world, and it won't fully heal what Tom did when he walked away. Rachel has tried to trace where the $5,000 in cash went. The investigator found evidence Tom had used some of it to buy a used car for cash in Arizona. Probably ditched his original car to avoid being tracked. After that, nothing. Tom bought a vehicle that couldn't be traced to him and vanished into it. The bank account Tom used for the transfer was eventually closed once Rachel got her money back. But the investigator found that Tom had opened 2 other accounts at different banks in the weeks before he left. Both were closed now. Both had been emptied. Tom probably moved money through multiple accounts to make it harder to trace. He'd also taken out a $20,000 personal loan 3 days before he left. Rachel found out about it when the bank contacted her demanding payment. Tom had forged her signature on the loan application. So not only had he stolen their savings, he'd also created debt in her name. Rachel had to prove the forgery, had to get the loan dismissed, had to clear her credit. It took months, and it was just one more betrayal, one more way Tom had screwed her over on his way out the door. He hadn't just taken what they had. He tried to saddle her with debt, too. The premeditation was staggering. Tom hadn't just woken up one day and decided to leave. He'd spent months setting this up, opening accounts, taking out loans, researching escape routes, packing gradually so Rachel wouldn't notice, planning every detail so he could execute it smoothly. What kind of person does that? What kind of father spends 6 months planning to abandon his children? What kind of husband goes through the motions of family life while secretly preparing to destroy it? I've asked myself those questions about Tom many times, and I don't have good answers. Some people are just capable of compartmentalizing, of living double lives, of caring more about their own desires than their responsibilities to the people depending on them. Tom was one of those people, and Rachel and her kids are paying the price for it. The most haunting part of Rachel's testimony was when she described the last time Tom held their 5-year-old. It was bedtime the night Tom left. He'd picked up their son, hugged him, told him he loved him. Rachel had thought it was sweet. Now she knows it was goodbye. Tom had held his child, knowing he'd never hold him again. Had said, "I love you," knowing he'd never speak to him again. Had tucked him in, knowing he'd never be there when that child woke up. How do you do that? How do you hug your own child goodbye forever and then walk away? Rachel said she hopes their kids never fully understand what their father did. She hopes they think he died or had some reason beyond his control for leaving. Because the truth is too cruel. The truth is their father chose to abandon them, chose money over them, chose a new life over being their dad. That truth would destroy them. So Rachel lies. She tells them Daddy got sick, or Daddy had to go away, or Daddy loved them but couldn't stay. Anything except the reality that their father deliberately walked away from them and never looked back. I gave Rachel every legal remedy I could. I returned her money. I gave her full custody. I ordered support even though I knew it would never be paid. I did everything the law allowed, but I couldn't give her what she really needed. I couldn't bring Tom back, couldn't make him face his children, couldn't force him to explain why he'd destroyed their lives. The law has limits. It can redistribute property. It can assign custody. It can order payments. But it can't make people care about the families they abandoned. It can't create accountability for people who run fast enough and far enough to escape it. Tom ran, and he's still running. And Rachel and her kids are left behind, dealing with the wreckage. I hope someday Tom is found. I hope he faces criminal charges for what he did. I hope he's forced to pay every penny he owes. I hope Rachel's kids get to look him in the eye and ask why he left them. But I've been doing this long enough to know that probably won't happen. Tom is likely gone for good. He'll live out his life somewhere under a different name. He'll never pay support. He'll never see his kids again. He'll never face any real consequences for what he did. And Rachel will raise those kids alone. She'll work and parent and struggle and sacrifice. She'll be both mother and father. She'll fill the space Tom left as best she can. But there will always be a hole, a missing piece, a father who should have been there and chose not to be. That's the real damage Tom did. Not the money, though that was devastating. The permanent psychological harm to 2 children who will spend their lives knowing their father didn't want them enough to stay. No court order can fix that. No judgment can undo it. Tom destroyed his family to escape it, and somewhere he's living with that choice. I hope it was worth it. I hope whatever freedom or new life he found was worth abandoning his children. I hope he thinks about them sometimes and feels crushing guilt. But probably he doesn't. Probably he's moved on. Probably he's convinced himself he had good reasons. Probably he's built a whole narrative where he's the victim or the hero of his own story. That's what people like Tom do. They rewrite history. They justify their actions. They make themselves feel okay about the terrible things they've done, because the alternative is facing what they really are. And Tom can't face that he's a man who stole from his wife and abandoned his children. So he ran, and he stays gone. And he lets Rachel and those kids carry the weight of his choices. I see Rachel's kids sometimes in the court building. She brings them occasionally when she has to file something. They're growing up, getting older, moving forward with their lives. But you can see it in them, the confusion, the hurt, the hole where their father should be. Those kids deserved better. Rachel deserved better. They deserved a husband and father who honored his commitments, who worked through problems instead of running from them, who valued his family more than his freedom. They got Tom instead, and Tom chose himself over all of them. That's the simple, terrible truth. When the choice came down to being there for his family or taking the money and leaving, Tom chose the money every time. Rachel has built a good life despite him. The kids are okay despite him. She's dating someone now who treats her well, who's good with her kids, who shows up and stays, who proves that not every man is like Tom. But the scars remain. The betrayal doesn't fully heal. The abandonment casts a shadow. Tom is gone, but the damage he did stays forever. That's what these cases teach me, that the worst harm isn't always physical, that financial abuse and abandonment can devastate just as thoroughly as violence, that the people we trust most have the power to hurt us most deeply. Tom used that power. He hurt Rachel and those kids as badly as anyone can be hurt. Then he ran away so he'd never have to see what he'd done. Somewhere he's living a life free of those consequences, and somewhere Rachel is still dealing with them every single day. That's not justice. That's just what happens when someone is determined enough to escape accountability. I did what I could. I gave Rachel her money back. I gave her full custody. I gave her legal validation that she was wronged. It's not enough. It's never enough. But it's all the law could provide. The rest Rachel has to do herself. Raise the kids, heal the wounds, build a new life from the pieces Tom left behind. She's doing it. She's strong. She's resilient. She's a good mother. But she shouldn't have had to be this strong. She shouldn't have had to do this alone. Tom should have stayed, should have been a father, should have been a partner. He wasn't. He chose emptying a bank account over being there for his family. And now everyone lives with that choice except him.